Hi, I'm Dr. Nick Gerlich. I'm the Hickman Professor of Marketing in the Department of Management, Marketing, General Business in the College of Business. I'm a Chicago native. You can probably tell from my accent. It's softened a little bit over the years, but if I'm in contact with another Chicago person, I fall right back into it real fast. My path to WT actually involved about 12 years in the great state of Indiana, where I went off to for all of my higher education. I got my undergrad at Anderson University. That was 1977 through 1981. I had majors in marketing, economics, and religious studies. I was a bit of an overachiever back then. And then I went to Indiana U, where I earned my MBA by December of 1982. I took off for a few months and then returned in the fall of '83 and started my Ph.D. I left there in 1989, having studied one thing my whole life, marketing, from undergrad through MBA and Ph.D. My first job was at WT, my one and only job. I started here in August of '89, and here I am still. Well, I didn't start out that way. I hope to finish at the MBA level, but as it turned out, we were in a terrible recession at that time nationally, and there weren't many jobs even for MBAs. And I said, well, I got to do something. So I just sent off my application to both University of Georgia, where I was thinking about a master's in market research, and then also at Indiana U, where I thought, well, maybe I'll just stick around here and get a PhD. And I got accepted at both and decided to just stay at IU and just started the program there. And it was very obvious that this was kind of like divine providence, if you will. Once I got into the PhD program, I realized this was my subject, and I loved it. And right then it became crystal clear that I needed to be an academic.
Do you have a connection to Route 66? Do you want to elaborate on what you do there, if you had any hiking or any cycling stories there?
I am a huge fan of Route 66. I grew up not very far from it on the south side of Chicago. And by virtue of that, back in the 1960s, some of our family vacations necessarily involved driving down Route 66. We even came to Amarillo, Texas a couple of times to visit family members who were living here at that time. My father, though, had a huge influence on my Route 66 affinities because he always used to prevail on us with stories from the summer of 1955 when he was a bachelor and two of his fellow bachelor buddies loaded into his brand new 1955 Chevy Bel Air and drove Route 66 from Chicago to LA. He loved to tell those stories, and I loved to listen to them over and over and over again, and I knew that someday I would make those stories mine. Around 2010, those stories started to begin for me. I started exploring up and down Route 66, starting in Amarillo because it runs right through town, and I had the luxury of basically driving to Amarillo, tossing a coin, and basically heads was west and tails was east. Whatever way the coin said to go, that's the way I went. And eventually I had covered every inch of Route 66, both directions, to Chicago on one end and Los Angeles, actually Santa Monica, on the other end. I came to love it, not just for its nostalgia, but for its history, for its culture, for its beauty. And so I really drank the Kool-Aid. I drove every bit of what is still drivable, which, by the way, is about 85%. But I also explored a lot of the other 15%, sometimes climbing through, under, and over fences and things like that, just so I could see where the old road was and to imagine what it must have been like driving across the great American West nearly a century ago. I probably have more hobbies than you care to know about, but some of my big ones are, let's see, I'll start with some of the small ones first. And I collect Starbucks mugs. And I've been through 3 or 4 different series of mugs that Starbucks has produced through the years. I probably got about 250 ones from my travels. I always make sure I stop in every state that I visit and try to get the state mug. They have them for a lot of cities as well, and then also countries when I travel abroad. I collect Pez. I've got hundreds of Pez containers. Oh, and then there's my beer and soda can collection. I've got more than 25,000 different beer and soda cans from around the world, dating far, far back to the 1930s, actually. Probably my biggest active hobby is photography, and I love doing this. It ties in handily with many of the other things I do. I photograph vintage neon signs. I have photographed in each of the lower 48 states. Thousands and thousands of old relic signs that have just been kind of left to weather on the side of the American roadway. I shoot abandonment. I love abandoned buildings, and I go out of my way to try to find them. And then I just like landscape photography in general. It's even better if I can find an abandoned homestead or something like that, just to add a little bit of flavor to the photo. But suffice it to say, I never go anywhere without my camera bag. I can thank my father, again, for my interest in photography. Back in the 70s, he had what was then probably the most common film camera available. It was the Pentax K1000. It was a real basic camera. There were no bells and whistles on it. Everything was full-on manual. But you know what? In the process of using a camera like that, you really begin to learn all about light and how to adjust for it and set your camera to fit whatever the light is, whether you're indoors, outdoors, whatever. And so I learned from my father, and then once again carried that with me into adult life. And now when I travel, I not just have my camera bag, but I've always got at least 3 cameras and 1 iPhone with me at all times.
You are an avid hiker, and you used to do cycling. Do you photograph all the trails and stuff that you've gone through, hiked and cycled?
One of the nice things about having so many activities and hobbies is that I can merge them. And so, yes, I photograph everywhere I ride, everywhere I hike. So I've got detailed information. My phone alone has more than 140,000 images on it. I'm always taking pictures. Memory's cheap, and there's no film or processing involved these days. So you may as well document, right? In June of 2024, I decided it was time to go back to the Grand Canyon to hike it once more. I'd already done it 3 times. My hike is always starting on the South Rim, take the Bright Angel Trail all the way down to the river. One way is 8 miles. You drop about 4,400 feet. In very simplistic terms, it's easy peasy. But coming back up is a whole other story. Now you've got 4,400 feet to climb. And you've got to really plan this thing carefully, because if you go too early in the spring, there can be snow and ice on the trail, which makes it very, very dangerous. Winter is out. Fall can be delightful, but you're losing daylight. So summer is the time when you've got the most daylight, but then you run up against heat. And the bottom of the canyon can be 40 degrees or more warmer than the south rim. And so they carry a lot of people out of there on stretchers or strapped to a donkey because they've succumbed to heat exhaustion down in the bottom. And there's one particular section known as the Devil's Corkscrew that is just nasty because the heat radiates off the walls of the canyon, and it's like being inside a convection oven. And I made that mistake the first time I hiked it. It was brutally hot. I survived it. The second time, I learned, I went a little earlier, went a little faster, but also went conservatively enough that I could get down and get back up without a problem. The third time I did it was in 2022 with another gentleman a few years older than me. And let's just say that I didn't have a great hike. Sometimes that happens. No matter how hard you train and prepare and all that, sometimes, you roll the dice and it just doesn't end well. And so I was not happy. I decided I know I can do better than that. So I came back this summer, and I had a really, really good hike. But I did it even more intelligently. I started at 3:15 in the morning while it was still dark, and I brought good lighting with me so that I could amble down the trail in 70-degree temps. Actually, I think it might have been a little cooler than that, and it was just heavenly. And I got more than half the way down before the sun was even up. So getting down to the river was simple. I dipped my toes in the water, and instead of sitting there and eating a sandwich, wasting time, I turned right around and headed right back up. And I finished the 16 miles in 7 hours, 42 minutes, and I'm calling that pretty good for a 65-year-old guy. Well, I got started in ultramarathon cycling as a result of watching the Race Across America on ABC back in the early 1980s. I knew that this was going to be something that I was going to participate in one day, and I set my mind to it. And so I crawled back on the bike in the summer of '83, and having put on a considerable amount of weight in grad school, and I said, okay, I got to lose weight first. And then by summer of '84, I was already doing my first ultramarathon, which is a 24-hour bike race. And I think I did 321 miles in 24 hours. And that's not exactly outstanding, but I was feeling pretty good about things at that point. But I kept going. I used that as inspiration, kept doing more and more, and pretty soon I was going past 400 miles in 24 hours. I did a bunch of self-supported tours around the Midwest, where I just loaded up my bike with my saddlebags and took off and would ride 80 to 100 miles a day, having the time of my life. I got married to my first wife in 1986, and she also was very passionate about long-distance cycling. So for our honeymoon, we got married in Indianapolis, flew to Los Angeles with our bikes, put our bikes back together in the basement of the airport, and literally rolled out the door and made it to Boston, 3,753 miles later. It was fun. 53 days of just seeing America.
Wow.
And then after that, well, we started doing more racing, long-distance racing, and getting better and better at our craft. And by 1993, we signed up to ride a tandem bicycle built for two basically, in the Race Across America. And we were successful. We rode the 2,900-mile route from LA to Savannah, Georgia, 2,900 miles in 11 days, 9 hours, and 20 minutes. Don't try this at home, okay? This is really, really insane. We slept 22 hours in 11 days.
That is just from my opinion, that is incredible. That I couldn't even imagine doing that. So
well, both of those transcontinentals were they shaped my life. They were life defining. Basically, I knew by virtue of first of all doing the honeymoon ride and then doing it at race pace, I could do pretty much anything I wanted to do. I don't have time for any other hobbies.
Understandable. Okay.
Set goals for yourself, by all means, and make them doable but not easy. You don't want to make a goal like I am going to be like Spider-Man and climb the Empire State Building. That's stupid. But maybe a goal that is like I'm going to run a marathon someday, or I'm going to ride 100 miles in one day. It's a stretch, but it's still within reach. Do it. Work hard. Make it your life. You really have to do it. I exercise every day, more than 2 hours, and that's because it's my lifestyle. And that in and of itself is an end, if you will, but I'm always training for the next thing, too. Always pushing myself just a little bit farther. Right now, my farther is plans to go to Spain in 2025 to walk a Camino, which is it's a spiritual pilgrimage that always ends in Santiago in the northwest corner of Spain. It started out primarily as a religious pilgrimage, but now quite a few thousand people do it every year, more as just as a personal quest to get to know themselves better. If they're praying along the way, that's great. Maybe they're just reflecting on life and finding themselves. But that's my farther. And so I keep going every day because I know that each time I train a little bit more, I'm getting closer to my goal. This has been the Beyond the 9 to 5 with Dr. Nick Gerlich. Thank you for watching.